But was there anything that was harder than you thought it was going to be as when you got the head coaching job?
No, I think the one thing that you have to like, you just have to pace yourself. Like me
It's a lot. Yeah.
wanting to be, the best recruiter, the best scheme guy, the best, like you have to
Yeah.
pace yourself on the standpoint of like, you're dealing with everybody's needs, and I thought about my grandfather used to always say, to whom much is given, much is required. Like that's really what goes on when you're a head coach. Like when you're a position coach, like you got 12 guys, right?
Yep.
And so it's like, okay, you take care of 12 guys' needs, and it's pretty simple, right? It's not, it can get, there's a couple players can be challenging, right? But when you're the head coach now, you're dealing with the needs of the players, the coaching staff, the administration, the boosters, the alumni, the future boosters,
Yeah.
right? And then you're adding agents to the mix,
Yeah.
so there's a lot of things that just keep coming across your desk nonstop. And if you don't just pause for a minute, and just, take a deep breath and not make everything is not the 4th of July firework, not everything is like such a big thing. You kind of have to compartmentalize each thing that comes across your desk and not just be in a panic about, everything that you have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, because there's just a lot that, entails. And as far as everything that you're responsible for, every single thing, there's not one thing where it's not, you can't say, oh, that's not my job. When you're an assistant coach, well, you're really only responsible for this and you take care of your
Your
responsibility.
players.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
like, no, everything that happens is your job. It's your fault. It's your responsibility. So, the great thing for me is I hired a great staff and I have a great administration that supports me here. So, I'm able to delegate things, and I can give a guy a job and I don't have to be like, oh man, that's not going to, I know that for sure that guy's going to go get that done for me.
Yeah. Yeah. You've experienced a lot of the recent changes in college football as a recruiter, as an assistant, now as a head coach of the NIL, the transfer portal, what's going on in our sport. What do you think is broken in the current NIL system, and how do you think it gets fixed?
Yeah. I just think there's a definitely a disconnect between the player, the agent, and the family, right? So in all of these cases, there's a third party that comes involved, and the third party has an interest for themselves or an interest for that school, right? The
Yeah.
parent and the player have a certain interest. And I don't think collectively all the time that those groups are together, right? So you could sit down with a family. I've been in situations, you sit down with a family and you have an agreement, or you think like, okay, boom, we're good. And then some guy comes in or an agent comes in, um, and then has a different agenda than what the family might have told you. And it's on both sides. I mean, it could be for the coach and the university, it could be for the player and the family. Like there's just all these different agendas. And I think it's hard when you're talking about 18, 19, 20-year olds, right? That was hard when you go to the NFL, and it's just standard contracts. And you're like, okay, how am I going to live? How am I going to get here? Like you're trying to figure all that stuff out as a player with an agent you barely know. And now you take that kid who's even younger and a family who has no really background in that. And we're all trying to make sure, right? We're all trying to like make sure we don't get screwed over, make sure there's liability in there. And I think that's really the hardest part right now. It's just trying to get everybody on the same page to do what's best for the kid at the end of the day. But everybody has their irons in the fire, and they're trying to figure out what's best for them. And sometimes we miss the part of, it's still about these players and these kids being successful adults and getting them a college degree. And right now it's just so money driven. Which to me, I think about guys like myself. I thought, man, I'm going to play in the NFL forever. I just had a great college career, back to back 1,000-yard seasons. I'm like, man, I'm going to make it.
Yeah.
And you don't, and you got nothing from school, and you're like, you're still back to square one where you just have a degree, which, it puts you it gives you a little bit of a head start, but you don't have anything in your bank account, like you don't have a slush fund of money in your bank account. So, I don't think that I believe that the players should get paid, and they definitely deserve that. from their hard work. I mean, these guys, as you know, I mean, if you're a student athlete, you're
Yeah.
you're, you're working your ass off and doing a lot for the school. I think it's
Yeah.
just it's hard right now for all three like everybody to get on the same page and do exactly what's right for the kid because everybody's trying to protect themselves a little bit. I mean, you have to, from
Yeah.
the what ifs and what could happen, and that's the hard part.
Yeah. How do you balance being a player's coach who has great relationships with the guys, who the players have a lot of love for, but you also got to make tough decisions as a head coach? You got to make business decisions about money and who gets what and who and what roster spots do you have. How do you kind of balance that dynamic between being a great player's coach and also doing what's best for the program?
Yeah, I think you have to uh, start off on the front end just being truly yourself and honest. I think that's what's made me a great players coach
Yeah.
throughout my career. Just this is me, scars and all. This is who I am. This is where I'm from. This is what I'm about. And, players respect that. And they come, I always say if you share your testimony, somebody's more willing to open up and become themselves, the best version of
Yeah.
themselves. So, I think that's the first initial part of it, having a real authentic relationship. But I
Yeah.
think the hardest part now that kids struggle with is just feedback. When you give them that feedback, it's from a place of love. It's not a place of I don't believe in you or I'm criticizing you. It's a place of like I want to see you become your best self, and this is where you're at, and I have to give you that feedback, to help you get there. And 90% of the kids get it, and they go where they're supposed to go, and 10%, have that resentment and take it personal, and they feel like the coach did them wrong. But I think if you start off on the front end being open, honest, authentic, and then you give them feedback, you know, daily, weekly, monthly on where they're at,
Yeah.
then when those tough decisions need to be made, they at least know, okay, this guy at least shot it to me straight. He didn't try to hustle me, or he wasn't like, stoic and never said a word to me. And, I don't know who this guy is or what's he's about. And I really think like when I was at Texas, I was like, one day I was telling Sark, I'm like, bro, just tell him your story. You need to tell him like who and I really think that changed the way Texas has changed the landscape there. I think it really changed the program there. And I thought, I've always kind of been that way. And I think that's hurt me sometimes in my career because other coaches don't typically like that for a guy to be, just himself and open and brash
Yeah.
like that. But that's me, and that's all I could be. So I think for our program, that's what we try to do. We just try to give these kids the absolute truth, exactly where you're at. My first day on the job, my first team meeting was like, fellas, half of you guys won't be here. I mean, every day it's an interview. You're fighting your ass off to prove that you should be here, right? And that's just the reality of college football. And so there was nobody that went there, nobody when we had an exit interview who we had to let go or, they, weren't up to par or wanted to go somewhere else where it was hard feelings because they knew, on the front end, they
Yeah.
got told exactly what it was.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite quotes that I've heard you say a couple of times is "One great year can change your life," and I've seen you post about it. I've seen you talk about it. What does that mean to you? What does that saying mean to Brendan Marion?
Yeah. So that really comes from once you see a miracle from God, like you can never unsee that. Right. And so for me and my story, it was I went to junior college. My first year did not go well. My uncle passed. I just had a lot of adversity, and I was a victim. Like I'm not saying it was anybody else's fault. I was just every time something happened, I was like, "Woe's me," like I just didn't know how to really overcome adversity like that. Didn't have much
Yeah.
structure in my home, so I just didn't really know how to overcome that. My emotional intelligence wasn't high at the time. And so what I did was I stopped making excuses, and I just said, you know what? This year is going to be the year. And every single day, it was all about like, this year has to be the year. And I'm going to give everything I possibly have every single day. I'm going to empty the tank and try to be my absolute best. And I did that and I became an All-American. I was still homeless. I was still, but I was able to make the dean's list, get a 3.0, get my AA degree, get out of junior college. And then, I always say you just have to restart every year and repeat that. Like every day,
Yeah.
I don't think about what's down the road. I'm not worried about that. I know, I'm thinking with the end in mind. I heard somebody say they create movies. and they do the last scene first. And so I always say, like, okay, what's the last scene? The last scene is me being a winner, whatever that winning thing looks like for me. What's my why? What's my purpose? What am I trying to win? What am I trying to accomplish? I think with that every day in the back of my mind, and every day I'm just emptying the tank. I'm giving my absolute best and wringing the rag out every day. I'm trying to, just get after it. And once you see that happen, and I always tell it, like, every year I can just show examples of guys who, I think about Jordan Addison. Like, all right,
Yeah.
bro, like, what's your wildest dreams? I asked him. He's like, man, I want my mom, my sister. I want everybody to get a house on the same street. I want to win a Bolitnikoff. I want to win a championship. I want to be
Yeah.
1,000. I'm like, all right, this is the plan that you're gonna have to do to get this done every day. And he did it every day. And then boom, it happened for him. Right. And same with the, Xavier. There's so many guys that have taken this thing and teams, like, and that's really what it's about. It's about, when we really break that down for guys and they understand it, then you see them start to really, because a lot of people are thinking about what's at the end, and they're not really going hard. They're hoping, right? And I always say hope is not a strategy. It's about your habits. It's your daily habits and your consistency and your discipline that's going to get you to where you want to be ultimately in the end. But once you see that one great year happen, now for the rest of your life, like, all right, I can go in anywhere. It's like you, bro. Like you
Good.
said,
Yeah.
all right, I'm going to media now, boom, and I'm gonna dominate media. It's like, because
Yeah.
you had dominated as a college football player, you had dominated as an assistant coach. You're like, all right, boom. So what? Now what? Here we go. Next thing, media. I'm dominating that.
Yeah.
And you put a plan together. You stay disciplined to the plan, and now you're rolling, right? And that's really all that's about.
Yeah. What's something that the media or fans may not understand about the business of being a head football coach? Like the actual business behind it, contracts, negotiations, all the sports business part of it. That because it is a big business, right? Like it's a big deal when you're a head football coach.
Yeah, I think the media does not see that if you're the head coach. I always say, like, I equate everything to you're the point guard in basketball, right? I played point guard all my life. You're the point guard in basketball, and I don't think that they realize if you're a head coach, your job is to put everybody in a position to make the shot on your team. Like,
Mhm.
and they think, like, okay, head coach, it's all about him. Da, 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 this guy gets everything, but really, my whole
Yeah.
day is trying to figure out how do I get everybody in position to live their dreams, right? So I've had guys already get poached from my staff. We haven't even, but it's because of the way that we're recruiting. We're number one in recruiting already. We're top this, we're top that. And they're trying to figure out, like, how are they doing things over there like that, right? And it's teaching all of my guys, like, I always say it's like using your gift, right? You got to use your gift. And so my gift, I'm sharing my gift to these guys every day, and they're putting themselves in a position to be successful for their families and what they need to accomplish. But I don't think a lot of people really get that when they pressure a head coach or they say crazy things about a head coach. Just in general, they don't understand that head coach is really sacrificing and serving the team, like, and everybody on the team. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
that's more of the, and even as a, we get, like, when you're first into college football, you're like, damn, that dude gets everything. But you don't think about, like, all his day-to-day tasks and everything that he has to accomplish as
Yeah.
a coach, right? And how he has to set everybody up and make sure it's an environment where everybody can grow. I always say, in our environment, you'll feel safe, you'll feel loved, and you'll feel like you matter. Like, those are
Yeah.
things that, people don't really get a chance to see from a head coach. They just see the guy standing on the sideline ripping people's ass on or Saturdays or Sundays, and they think, God, that guy's,
Yeah.
like, they don't see that the guy just, made sure this guy moved here. He made sure this guy had the right diet. He made sure this guy was training this way. He made sure this guy got to the
Yeah.
chiropractor. Like, all the different things that you have to make sure get done every day.
Yeah. What's the NIL support like at Sacramento State?
Beautiful, beautiful. I mean,
You
beautiful.
you got the money? Yeah.
I mean, we're not Texas. I always say, at Texas we had more money than God, but we're definitely doing okay. We're doing well, in the standpoint that when our players show and prove that they'll be compensated for their abilities and their work ethic and the things that they bring to this university.